everyone, welcome to Creative Happy Hour. And actually, this is not Creative Happy Hour, this is a shorter format that we are calling Creative Conversations. And we are going to have a different creative come and speak to us each time over a glass of wine. So welcome you guys. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
We've got a fun session for you guys.
Cheers.
Cheers. So you are...
I am Micah.
I'm Karena.
And this is our creative friend, Max von Prague.
He is a multi-passionate creative, otherwise known as...
A Renaissance man.
Which is very exciting. So, not embarrassing at all, right?
And that's why he's here having a creative conversation with us.
Over a glass of Alexandre Cyrus wine, which is our wine from St. Helena, California.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome.
Yeah,
Cheers to you.
good being here. Good being here. And
Yes.
the wine definitely will help with the quality of the conversation.
It
Well,
always does.
It always makes it more creative.
It does.
The creativity flows
We
like
get
wine.
smarter the more we drink.
Yes, we do.
In
Very
case
much
you
so.
didn't know that
Very
about
much
us.
so.
It will roll right off my tongue.
Exactly.
Whatever, yes.
Exactly.
So Max has lived in Marin County as well as we have for a very long time now. So
Yes.
we wanted to know, how does a Renaissance man enjoy his life in Marin County? Because you don't want to talk about job or anything like that. That's boring. At this point, we want to know, what is creativity for you and how do you experience it in this part of the
Well,
world?
you just said it, the word experience. It's about having a rich experience. And life is about having experiences, having a lot of experiences. And I'm always interested in how I can have the most full and rich experience. And I live here because the quality of life is so amazing. I mean, I don't consider it the United States. It's something different than the United States.
of California.
Exactly.
It's
California Republic.
Because of the beauty and many people won't agree, but the city in the East Bay is not for me. I'm really somebody who wants to live in Marin for the beauty of...
I can agree with that, especially these days. I find like the city is a little bit of a village and it's a little bit of a cold village. And sometimes I find that we have a lot of eccentrics here in Marin, which I really appreciate. I think some of the old style personalities, the writers, the rockers, I think that we have all of that here in Marin and they choose it for a reason. So when you speak of yourself as a Renaissance man, what does that mean? What do you like to enjoy most? Do you enjoy the food, the outside, music, art? What?
Yeah, it's the whole palette. For years I had a hard time defining myself professionally because there's so many things I did and that I can do, and the work that I did was involved with for years, and I still do at times. I would take people on vacation. I worked as a tour leader. Being multilingual, speaking French, Italian, German.
He only speaks 5 languages.
Yes,
I rolled into this like some people with those languages would do an interpreter's career. I would do a career as a group leader. I get hired by companies that then use me as the talent who comes on board to lead the experience, to create the experience for the people. And I always love doing that. I love being with those people and making sure that they get everything, that there's music according to the scenery, that there is amazing excursions, experience. Yes.
But I think I want to hear more about, I want you to tell our listeners a little bit more about where that comes from. I mean, did you grow up in a creative life, in a household that was creative? I mean, isn't your mother in music and your dad is an artist as well?
I grew up surrounded by creativity, intellectual family and artistic. My mother, was a classical vocalist, and my father, he was first a French teacher in school, and later he was a representative of our country in France, in Paris, he was a diplomat for the arts in France.
From the Netherlands.
From the Netherlands,
Yes.
and we even before he did that, our home was always filled with creativity. There were house concerts. There was there were always creative people around.
Right.
My friends, my parents knew actors, painters.
We like to define creativity as that, as kind of the exchange of ideas in all these different realms and kind of tying things together.
Yes.
Do you have a story that most defines your childhood or your growing up in terms of different worlds of creativity coming together in your household?
That kind of defined who you are today.
Yeah.
I think it contributed a lot to who I am. I heard classical music since I was a baby, since I was born. When I was 6 years old, I purchased my first records, my vinyl record with classical music. Most kids wouldn't do that.
No.
And I started building a collection, and I didn't go through a period of rock and roll like most young people do. I didn't only listen to classical music, but I didn't have a period of hard rock and like rebellion like that. I always was into music and had a lot of music around me and records. And,
well, you're a
and
singer as well.
I played the violin growing up, and
wow.
and when I was a late teenager, I started taking voice lessons. Yeah.
And he has a beautiful voice.
Oh wow, nice. And well, so I think that you've mentioned Renaissance man, you've mentioned classical music. So do you view yourself as more of a classicist, or do you see yourself as some kind of an iconoclast when it comes to mixing things together and then breaking those traditions?
No, I don't see myself as any of this. It's more the backdrop of my life.
I like that.
It's more.
I really like that.
It's more the backdrop. And speaking of backdrop, what really matters to me, and I feel very much like a European in that sense. Aesthetics really matter to me in everyday life.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's one of the reasons I live in this county.
Absolutely.
Where no matter where you look, there's beautiful views. There's
Yeah.
beautiful nature. There's beautiful views.
The light's amazing here too. I think the light has a certain
I grew up
quality.
in a world where people would also dedicate a lot of attention to what the home looks like on the inside, where people spend more time inside because it was always raining outside.
Absolutely.
So the home is beautifully decorated. There's a lot of attention to detail. There's beautiful flooring. Not like most people live in California. They don't really care. They have tacky.
They don't care. No.
They have in most rental places there is super tacky stuff on the floor. like the carpets are really not beautiful.
Right.
And filthy.
As I see him kind of judging.
Yes.
So
No. Actually,
you
this
say
is very
that,
nice.
You know, it makes me think. What do you think when you say, you know, what do you think that it does for a person to surround themselves with aesthetic beauty? I mean,
Very good question.
How do you think it
That's a great question.
It fuels your
soul. It
I mean,
actually is good for you. It's good for your soul to create beauty, and if you work from home, to make sure the home looks pretty.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Like
with
some
that
people
so much.
will when they make love, they make sure the room is orderly and beautiful.
And candles.
Some people.
Yeah,
Yes.
candles are nice. You don't want bright
Lighting.
lights. Yeah, especially as you get older, you just want things to be a little darker. You know, you want to go for like the.
But I like the idea of the aesthetic beauty in the home. I think it's so important. I have a friend that we
And
actually
you have that. I mean, yeah.
Oh,
you. Yeah, well,
Karena has a background in design.
I'm a multi-passionate creative. Yeah, I'd say that. I do have a background in design. My mother was an antiques dealer. I studied art and literature and moved around hugely. And we lived in historic homes. So I have the history side. So when I decorate a client's house, I don't say, what can we have that's new and trendy? I say, what can I have that's going to be timeless and unique and that represents that client's story? I try to tell a story.
And their values.
Yeah, and they love it.
This is your job.
This is one of my many jobs. This is one of my many jobs.
She's a multi-passionate.
I am a multi-passionate creative. But my clients now, they say, well, what's the story? And I say, oh, you're a Victorian eccentric, and you're this and that. And they're like,
I like that.
Oh, yes. Or I'll be like, you're Jeffersonian bohemian. And they're like,
Ooh.
Yeah,
What am I?
Exactly.
I want to know what I am.
You're Shangri-La fiber frequency. But that's, I think people like to hear a story. Don't you find that in every kind of creative realm that people do love that story, that it feeds them so much more than having something boom in their face, finished product? I think that knowing the background is always incredible.
There has to be some connection to the space.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When you create a space, you have to have some connection to it.
Yes. And your senses, you haven't mentioned that yet, but the senses are a very important part. Aesthetics, what you see, but also what you smell. I recently bought a big bottle eau de cologne from
the old historic one? Yes,
the one that's been
17 whatever.
a big bottle,
It's
and
massive.
you put like an abundant quality in your hands to rub them together.
Oh yeah.
And it's like
it's so nice.
and also essential oils, and I would like to get a diffuser, and I want to do more with smells in my home. That's
well, the smell is one of the oldest. The olfactory is one of the oldest parts of the brain.
Complete in terms of memory.
In
Evokes
relation to memory.
so much more than anything else. Yeah. I don't know what the secondary memory thing is, but definitely smell being the first one. I think that sound might be a very powerful memory evoking
so
tool.
smells, so aesthetics. I can get really focused on how things look in the house. I can get very precise about what's on the wall and
So
where exactly it's hanging and the
Can you
color.
describe your decor to us?
My decor is, well, for example, I live not in an unusually beautiful place, but it looks really beautiful because the floor is covered with Asian rugs. I have a collection of Asian rugs that I purchase at auctions, and I love doing that. I love going to sniff out those rugs and then pick the beautiful ones and buy them. So there's a lot of like real soulful beauty, and when they're very worn, I like it. I don't like it if they're new. If they're worn, they have had experiences.
There are lots of parties there.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
well, no, but that's part of the story. It's woven in.
Beautiful rugs on the floor, and I recently painted a piece of wall in Bordeaux red.
Oh.
Nice.
So the place is white.
Bordeaux.
I
so
love that.
dark red, and
wine.
and that does miracle.
Oh yeah, that's a very soulful color. That's a color that kind of evokes.
But just one piece, not the whole room. That would make the space smaller. But one little piece of wall, and I
and
consider.
what was the name of the color? Did the name of the color enter into it for you? Because for me that plays into it, even though it means nothing. But for me it does really good.
Maybe
She's a writer, she's a writer. So that makes sense that you connect with that.
We painted our walls one year gossip red. And I just loved that. Gossip red is incredible. But yeah, and then I was thinking of names for Burgundy in Italian.
So the lighting is very important.
Candles?
I have candles, but I use a lot of lampshades. Beautiful vases and then a lampshade. And if the light is not right, it's also very important. Last week I bought a lamp from a friend who was leaving the country, and when it was in my space, I really didn't like the quality of the light, so I put it on Facebook Marketplace, and somebody came pick it up 3 hours later.
But that's major. I think the light, and that's what I was saying earlier about Marin County, is that the quality of the light in Marin County outside is so incredible, and I think the light inside really affects you because therere's a wavelength to the light, and it
There's
affects
a frequency.
your brain waves. Miss frequency, exactly. No, but it does. I think that's incredible. I mean, it touches everything you look at. So obviously the light's very important. So tell us about your.
No, I'm not done.
Outfit. Oh, he's not done. He's not done.
Keep going.
More. Yes, more.
Tell
us more.
So the senses. We haven't talked about food.
About
cooking.
Well,
so
I love
I
We
love
do
to
like to
cook.
talk
You
about
know.
And you're a good cook. He makes
you-
very good risotto.
Nice.
I make a lot of different things, and I like
makes
also the variety and sort of having the flavors I want. I often prefer to cook myself rather than go out because I can make it exactly the way I want
See,
to.
you didn't even
For
hear me.
years, I wouldn't eat in Italian restaurants because I just like my own pasta
Right.
better, and I learned from Italians on how to make Italian food, risotto.
Yeah, no, and that's part of the experience. I think that adding all those ingredients and thinking back to how you learned how to make it and the process and everything else. I mean, I think that enters into it.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not always in the mood to do that, but I think that when you are, it's kind of, it feeds you in more ways than just stomach. So, okay, so tell us more about, so we've got the food, we've got the colors, we've got the
taste,
light, we've got
light, smell,
sight, we had.
music with sound.
What are we missing? Touch. No, we did touch. Fabrics? He's like, you guys are ADD, and I'm desperate.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Cheers.
Cheers. This is why we drink.
This is
It slows us down just a little bit.
it just gets things a little bit,
It slows it down. We need that sometimes.
Yeah. So
Yeah, but what is so you are doing this program to
we're doing this because we believe that creativity, so many people think creativity and they think, oh, art. Oh, this is something fake. This is not real. This is not
Or
something,
craft.
or crafting. They think this is not something that's part of an intellectual or business person's life. And we're like, no, that's not true. Creativity is part of everybody's experience. And if we learned to be more creative in terms of pulling ideas from different places, looking at things in a different way, slowing down, seeing the quality of life, we would all be much better for it. So what we have observed is that so many people around us have had their early life where they were doing the things they needed to do, and they had their career and they had their kids and they had, when you're just surviving, and then you get to this point where all of a sudden you say, stop.
You
I
need
want
something.
to-
You
yeah,
need,
I need
something
something
more,
deeper.
a deeper experience.
Yes.
And I think that's what creativity
Well,
offers
that's
you.
it's experience. It's also doing and
Yeah.
expressing. I've always been into self-expression and helping
Right.
others to be fully self-expressed and acting in an expressive ways. In other words, making things, doing things,
Yes.
which is a very different kind of species than people who analyze and the intellectuals. You could say you have the intellectuals and you have the artist. And they're very different animals.
I think you could have both.
Hold on. You're French. You're French, and the French love to dissect everything and
Yes,
to analyze
we do.
beautiful
We do.
art. I lived in France. I went to French schools, and I know all about it. And I don't think it's so great.
Right.
This aspect is very. I think that artists.
Oh no.
They create, and the intellectual often criticizes and has something to say to artists, but they're not doing the work.
Absolutely,
They're
that's
just
true,
they're just
yeah.
sitting there and analyzing and criticizing.
But I think that's
I've
cool.
I've
That's
never
interesting.
seen I've never
So
seen a
there's-
painting of
Right.
the critic. You know.
Well, see, so there's a different, there are two
Yeah.
words though. There's critiquing
Yeah.
and criticizing. So those are two very different things. The French sometimes will morph those into one, and I agree with you. French criticizing, critique, means to criticize first, not to critique. Whereas I think that a critique is something that you've invited somebody to do as an artist because you want somebody to help
Because
you
you
to
want
improve.
feedback
Yeah, you
on
want
their
that, yeah.
experience.
That's what-
Sure,
Because-
sure.
because art is
just,
something you experience.
Just hang out with me in this idea for a moment.
I'm
Hang.
the mediator.
We're hanging.
Just be with this for a moment. That if you are a true artist, you will look for the company of other true artists and not necessarily intellectuals who are going to tell you everything that's wrong with you.
For sure. Well, but I think that you invite it. I think that, yeah.
Because artists, they know how sensitive we are. They're very
Yes.
sensitive.
Yeah.
Artists can be sensitive,
Incredible sensitive people. They don't want to be criticized
Well, I agree,
and
yeah.
shut down.
But that's why. So I host a writing group in Marin County every week, and it is very hard to find writers who are willing to go to writing group because they are afraid of being criticized. They're afraid of being judged, and that is a huge thing for the artist who is often a solitary actor in their own production because they have this fear. But it all comes from the ego. So it depends on what kind. But I really like the idea of collaboration. I really like the idea of creatives feeling that it's a safe place for them, and that's what we're trying to do.
You host the
here.
writing circle.
Yes.
Yeah, she's a writer.
And you
I'm so kind.
you
I'm
are
so nice.
you are the one who actually supports their writing. So if they have writer's block,
Yes, I'm actually.
you know what to
yes.
do with
She
that.
So I
actually just
actually
wrote a
have-
book
yes.
on writer's
Oh,
block.
that's
I have a
fantastic.
book called Writer's Block is a Pain in the Ass, but it's all in your head. And it's all about the ego and the mental constructs that have created this mental block. So we identify them and help them to break them down because it is kind of a decision to be blocked by this fear that, you're never gonna be creative again, or you're never going to write something smart, or every writer is better than me. And that happens in so many of the disciplines. I think when they talk about creative genius, and they used to talk about it as something that would visit you, or the muse would visit you.
Yes.
It could just as easily go away. And that's a fear that so many creatives have.
That's true, but the creative block, and I've worked with artists and helped artists many years ago. They are often stuck because of criticism.
Yes.
Of people who criticized them when they were younger.
Yes.
And that got locked in.
Yeah, they have like a childhood trauma.
The aunt who said, this is horrible work,
Oh,
or
yeah.
you will never succeed.
Or why are you doing this? It's not useful. I
Yeah.
mean, all
You
these
can't make
things.
money doing this.
Right,
This
right.
is
That's another
a
one.
waste of time.
Yes.
Right. So we shut down. Yeah. And people that are creative, they need encouragement.
Yes.
And they don't need to hear how it's not going to work.
Right.
But
And I
they
think,
really need
I
to
think that's the essence of why we want to do creative happy hour and creative conversations, because we want to create a space where people can come together and talk about this and feel like we're honoring the creative life.
Absolutely, yeah. We admire every single creative out there. I mean, it's, sometimes we joke, we say we don't judge anyone. We said, well, sometimes we'll giggle or whatever, but in reality, we really admire every single person who's brave enough to put themselves out there and live this creative life.
So you'll be inviting some of the people in your writers group.
Yes. And what's wonderful with my writers group is that people who were always afraid to consider themselves as an author, they'd be like, oh, I'm an inspiring writer. I'm like, stop saying that.
Yeah, I am.
So that's, you're going to write this and you're able to write this. And they're all like, I never thought I could do this. And I'm finally feeling like I can do it. Yes, they'll have stumbling blocks. And yes, they'll have issues. And yes, some are better than others. But they all have something so interesting to say. So I think that's kind of our little safe space. And we're not saying that we're awesome in our creative happy hour.
We are saying we're awesome. We are awesome.
But we said we want to do something creative together.
Yes.
And we said, how are we going to create this? We said, let's just jump in and do it. So we started, and that's kind of a little example of, hey, we suck a little bit, but we're doing it and we're putting out there and we're hoping to be very positive for the creative community. So it's,
we're trying to create a conversation, and we're winging it on a certain level because we've never done it before, right?
Every day.
but who creates anything that they've never done before?
That's
I never had a child before, but then when I had one, I figured out how to.
You were killing it. It was perfect.
Yeah,
best mom ever.
Yeah, best mom ever. But,
so what many people and many of the viewers may not know is that Micah actually makes beautiful artwork, and in my home, which I just described, I have your artwork.
Do you have her pastels?
On the wall. I have. I can show pictures of what I have on the.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what you have because
we'll put them up on the screen.
So I have to say, Max was one of the first people in my creative journey that really. Basically, told me you're an artist.
Yes,
you're an artist, and I was always had the urge to create and make.
Well, you're such a creative. I mean, you've always been, ever since I met you.
But he was one of the first people in my life that was like, you are an artist, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not just doing.
But that means so much. I mean, so look what happened. Did. Like, look years down the road. That's incredible. Like to give that gift to somebody, to tell them yes.
Yeah,
he always
hung up my artwork.
And I wonder,
always.
And I look at it every time I move again, and I say, no, I really want. On my wall, it's very
Thank
genuine.
you for saying that.
I still have that piece that you're
there's
meant
something
to.
Yes,
you do.
I have it.
Some gift you have with colors, and you really have a great sense of color, I recognize that because my art also has a lot of color.
And can we get some examples of yours to post up? We posted up in our.
He has great artwork as well.
Excellent.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you. Because Micah's got this great. Not only is it color, but because some people can just slap up color and it's just like whatever. But I'm sure yours is the same way. Where yours are so expressive. I mean, you can really tell the feeling that was going on.
Yeah, there's something going on when I do it.
It's very interesting. It draws you in.
Yeah.
And now that you're doing the fiber arts, they tell the same type of story, where it's just a very enveloping medium, and I think it's something that you're really exploring and having fun with. So in terms of your production, so you mentioned you painted, you mentioned that you did music. What are you most interested in right now?
Yeah, this is all like the texture and the backdrop of my life. What has my focus is to create awareness in the conversation between men and women, and around intimacy and the man-woman dynamic. At the moment, the conversation about the Me Too movement is the most important conversation, I believe, that we are to have in this culture.
Which is so interesting that a man says that it's the most important conversation.
I think that it's impacting men a lot too.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing to say, though, that you're saying it's the most important conversation.
But it's such an important. But I think that we have such a different vocabulary between men and women, and I think that especially in this country, I think there's been a breakdown in communication, and I think there's so many. When I've spoken about creative happy hour in front of men, so many of them will feel threatened and be like, "Oh, that's not real. That's stupid," because they do real jobs and they're at the office. And they've broken it down into a man-woman thing, and I say absolutely not.
No,
everybody can be creative.
Yes,
and and I think that just as women need to stop being objectified and treated like the secondary thing, the male artists need to stop having that evil, tortured genius image that some of them have had, which I think is just as harmful as the bimbo image or the sex bot image.
What do you mean?
A lot of the like Woody Allen, here he is, he's victimizing women, but he's a torture genius. Therefore, you have to excuse that because he's such a genius that the way he treats women doesn't matter. Or a painter like Jackson.
He doesn't get attacked though because he's not attractive.
You're talking about a sense of entitlement.
I mean, sorry, Woody Allen, I'm a huge fan, but you're not really hot, so it doesn't matter.
So artists are often tortured, and they go through all kind of emotional states, depression, ups and downs. This is normal. This is actually important to
which we've talked about on the show before.
Yeah, we have.
We don't want the artist to be even keel or medicated. We don't want that.
We want the artist to express art.
Yes, we want him to be very alive and have a lot of different feelings. And yes, so that's why there's often a lot of drama and stories.
And sometimes feelings aren't pretty, and relationships between people are not pretty, but they do feed the conversation. They feed your output.
They can be messy.
Yeah, I'll tell a funny story of I watched a video about artists that come from mental institutions and where they get to develop their art, and it's being supported. And one artist who came from the mental institution was so famous that he had started having exhibits in other parts of the country, and the person who was helping him with that, who was actually organizing his participation in the exhibit, was traveling with him. And when they went to the airport, he was coming from the mental institution to the airport to go to his to go exhibit his work. He said, you have to carry my suitcase. And she said, why do I have to carry your suitcase? He says, because I'm the artist.
Wow.
There you go. I mean, there are these expectations, I think that, but I mean, somewhere.
That's, I mean, I don't want to start diagnosing.
Well, see, but I don't think that's like a sex rule.
It's just
thing
a funny
so much
story.
As I think,
it's not meant to make a statement.
But I think that admiring the artist and calling, like in Hollywood, for example, there's this huge thing about this is the talent. We treat them a certain way.
Yes.
We respect them like crazy.
Yes.
And I think that valuing talent like that is kind of incredible. So I'm the artist, therefore people should serve me, rather than I'm the artist, I should be starving in a corner, is kind of refreshing. But it doesn't mean that you can torture everyone around you.
Well, it's turning the whole narrative around on its head, which is kind of refreshing in a way.
Yeah.
It's all of a sudden we're giving the artist more value than we give the intellectual world that we constantly
there's something very magnetic about art and about artists, and if you look at the art market, where paintings are sold of people like
incredible.
You and me, who happen to be born with an incredible determination and talent. Like I heard on the news that a Monet was sold this week for $110 million at Sotheby's. $110 million, and that's the highest amount that a Monet was ever sold.
Right, and it keeps going up. I mean, there's so many pieces now.
So there's a certain mystery. Like, what is it?
The thing with Monet, though, I mean, all of these, and I think we've talked about this before. It becomes ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Ubiquitous. Me and my
Ubiquitous.
vocabulary. Ubiquitous with the culture. So it's almost like, it's so interesting to me how these works of art can continue to vibrate through different generations. They continue to vibrate, and then we pass them on. We pass them on, like
and who has owned them also contributes to the value of the piece of art.
It's very interesting.
It's fascinating to watch on YouTube films about the art market and auctions and what happens to those paintings.
And the value that's going up, but it's kind of, and this is the funny part where we were talking about the financial sector, people in real jobs saying that the creativity doesn't matter, but here they are investing in and paying for these things as a status symbol or as something of value that they think is going to go up.
And
so
then there's also this imbalance. Like I think the one of the Van Gogh paintings was also sold
in
for
English. That's Van Gogh. Sorry.
Yeah. we have to always like help with the French.
Vincent Van Gogh.
He's Dutch.
And I do have a throat disease, and yes, that's how it comes out. So he made the paintings
We went to their
yes, that
grave sites. Remember?
the paintings sell for also tons of millions.
But he
And
never
if you
sold them when he was alive. poor
not
man.
only that, he had absolutely no money.
None.
He couldn't
lived,
afford the
he
paint
lived
to
in
make his
the
paintings.
poverty
He was
home.
freezing his butt
He
off
had
at the
no
end. Yeah.
money,
One ear.
and this man's paintings. That's just really mysterious.
It is mysterious.
It is
Yeah.
mysterious.
How
It's
that happens.
so interesting.
Right? Sometimes we're like, do I have to die to get famous? You know, and I think there's something to that. But and it's funny, you were mentioning YouTube, and I think that that's so interesting because I think that's changing the way that people consume news about creatives and creative production. I think it's changing it, not always in the best way. You know, we have these different writing apps as well that are, you know, I think it's more easily, consumable stuff that's smaller bites of things. And I think it's changing the discourse a little bit. What do you think about that? Have you noticed that? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, what do you feel about the
ever accelerating rate of construction, like of consumption and production of
technology?
I guess you could call it creative output, but fueled by technology.
So the question is what I think about the influence of technology on the world of art. I actually have no comments. Yeah.
You're a Renaissance man. You're going to stay there.
I have no comments. I also love technology and what it can do.
Yeah.
But it comes from a different place in the brain. Yeah, those skills come from a different place. Although IT people will tell you, tech people will tell you that they're very creative, and they are very creative.
I would argue,
but I am not expert to speak.
Right. Well, people who build a website or a giant complicated system will call themselves architect.
Yeah.
And I think that
it's true.
Kind of
I mean, I think about, I'm a knitter and a crocheter, and
that's
if
mathematical.
but
I can't do it.
if you ever read a knitting pattern, not only do you have to learn a language to read these
binary
patterns,
code.
It's a code.
Yeah.
It's very similar to computer coding, and I think that knitters were the first coders.
I think so too.
I mean, because it's all in code. These stitches, they're all in code, and to read these patterns is. I think
that's a language that I am not.
It is an art to create stitches in a pattern is a code, and I'm sure that I probably might be good at coding.
I think you might be,
because
absolutely.
Because of that experience, and and I do think there's something artful about it.
Absolutely.
Again, I've never done it, but I have a feeling that perhaps it may be similar.
Yeah, and it's something that you could always explore at a later date.
Yeah.
Nothing's ever,
I'm not going to go into coding anytime soon, so don't worry.
Yeah, we don't have time for that. But so here's kind of, I think, our last, unless there's something else that you'd like to touch upon, but our last question, we talked a little bit about how you grew up with this multi-creative household, and then how you've been considering yourself a Renaissance person living in Marin County, being influenced by all of the quality of life here. How do you see your creative being evolving as you move into the next chapter?
Well, what I want to say about that is that even though yes, I grew up with a lot of art and music around me, I was also very depressed as a teenager and coming out of my background, and I've always been pursuing aliveness. So I would say, and that's also I think what the artist is about. Hold on. But this is also what the artist is about. Is somebody who would live life fully, who would live life to the fullest, which is about the quality of his experience of the senses. It's not about success. It's not about money. It's really about being fully alive, feeling your feelings, being in the moment,
and then expressing some way of some form of. But
it doesn't really matter whether you are making art or enjoying art at an exhibit, or whether you're whether you're the cook or the one who eats.
Right.
It's all.
So for you, it's all part of the same experience.
It's all the same experience. That's really.
And so, do you see a progression in where you think that your whole feeling of creativity and the parts you want to explore?
No.
You're just going to keep doing. I mean, do you see an expansion though, or do you just see yourself remaining on this same general sphere, the plane, I guess it would be?
No. I just see life getting better but not necessarily through an expansion. It's just going through different stages.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I love it. Do you have anything you want to say to our viewers about living a creative life?
I just,
As a
I
final-
think
as a
I
grand
think I
finale?
think I just said it. Live life to the fullest.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
No, I like that. I like
Yeah.
that ending. Live life to
I
the
like
fullest.
it very much. Well, thank you so
Yes.
much for joining us.
Pleasure.
It was awesome having a
Great.
creative conversation
It
with
was
you.
really fun.
Yes, it was great. And cheers to you. Our glasses are, well, mine's
More than half
mine's
empty.
half empty.
We have
Yours
half-
are completely
yeah.
empty. The wine
Yeah.
was lovely. I will present. It's Alexander Cyrus, St. Helena Cabernet Sauvignon, 2010.
Ooh, a 2010.
And it's not
Very
for
fancy.
sale, but if you guys want some, and if you comment down below, and you're really, really cool, we might find a
Oh,
way to
because
get you some.
made this.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yep. I
It's our
didn't
family
stomp it
wine.
with my own feet, I promise. But I did make it, and I actually did the label, which I will.
Ooh,
So
it's
you're
quite
the
funky.
flavor person.
I'm the flavor person. I'm Flavor Flav.
You are not. She's not Flavor Flav. But,
Cheers to you guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
All
See
right.
you next
Thank
time. Cheers, ladies. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Here we are again for another one of our creative conversations.
Creative conversations.
We're drinking some French rosé, kind of cheap, not like our next guest, who is French, however.
Yes.
And we would like to introduce you guys to our friend Natalie, who's an incredible architect, interior designer, French creative, who has had a really interesting career and experience. So we would love to talk to her. And Natalie, could you introduce yourself to us?
Sure, thank you for.
Cheers. Let's have a
Thank
sip
you for
before we
being here.
start.
Yeah, cheers.
So, as you said, Karena, I'm a French architect who moved in the Bay Area 15 years ago
Nice.
with my children for just a short amount of time, about 6 months, to get another experience of life and California life, basically.
Nice. Can I
So
ask?
you didn't mean to stay.
Right, exactly. We're going to
Yes.
start asking questions right away.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're just like, what?
Yeah. So, was Marin County or California a dream for you, or did it just happen to be a convenient destination for you at the time?
I think probably the California dream was part of the process and the experience, but it also had more meanings for me because I used to come here for vacation and really enjoy it, and I think it was the right place for me to come and enjoy a different life
Very
with
nice.
a little tint of the south of France where I'm coming
Oh,
from.
yeah.
So it's like familiar,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
different,
But
which is very
different.
interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is very
So,
different.
so what made you make the jump from this partial long vacation to moving here? And did your creativity and your professional life have something to do with it?
Yes, in some way it does, because 6 months is just the right time to settle in and get used to the local life, and I think the opportunities here were better for the art opening in the design industry and the architecture
It's big
field
here.
as well.
Yeah.
Yes. First of all, because it's always, there is a lot of creativity around here. And
We've noticed that so much.
Yes. Even if the art field itself was not very developed at this time. To my
Yeah, 15
opinion.
years. Yeah, you
I mean,
think
you
there are
have
waves.
few museums here and there in the city, but really it's more the process and the involvement of the people
Yeah.
into the art and trying to discover more and really get the sense of the skills and the craftsman of any part of the creativity process. It
This
can
was-
be painting, architecture, arts.
Yeah, it is.
all of
It is
those.
vibrant here,
Yeah.
even though it's not in the same. It's not in the same framework that it is in Europe or in France. I mean,
Right.
when you go to, I mean, I've visited Europe many times, and it's, they really do, worship the artist there in everything, in the food, in the way they display the food, in
But there's a
the
formality to
museums.
it.
There's a formality to it, and it is
Exactly.
very. It's part of things like paint is part of the wall or wallpaper is part of the. It's very much. It's in the water. there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, it's more of I don't
process.
know.
It is
more
right,
of a process.
process.
Yeah, so-
Absolutely.
So
agree.
I get that sense just from experiencing both.
Absolutely.
And-
I agree with you.
And
So I
I-
get what you're saying.
Right, and I think also we were talking about this last time in our previous creative conversation about choosing to live in Marin versus choosing to live in San Francisco
Sure.
proper. And I really think that there's a feeling that San Francisco is kind of a village. Yes, there are museums, but I think that the people who are creating things and experiencing things in a very creative sense do live outside of the city.
Yes.
Right?
They do.
Have you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. And the new generations coming in the Bay Area for the past 10 years are really craving for these culture and the, I mean, they need to be kind of educated on this
Yes.
field because they, I mean, working in the design and working with these people in the creativity process, I can see that they don't have that culture that is part of our.
Yeah.
Right. There's a big difference.
It's a
between
given
this.
in
Right.
your
Given in
culture.
our culture.
So tell us how you collected this experience and this, how you built yourself from childhood in France, how you experienced creativity. You know, you were brought up in a very creative environment in a
Yes.
creative family. So how did you experience that?
For me, I was raised in the family with architects and art involved in my daily life.
So yeah, so you grew up in an artistic environment, a family of architects and artists.
Yes.
Wait,
correct?
were you an only child?
No, I have a brother.
Brother.
You have a brother.
That is
Okay. Older or
not-
younger?
Older.
Older brother. Okay.
Yes.
And
Just trying to
Natalie's
get the
two,
picture here.
yeah, Natalie's two children are both in the artistic world.
Oh,
I feel.
okay.
So
I want to hear
we can-
about that.
We'll talk about that
Yes.
later, but let's talk about, so your childhood.
Yes, so I was really involved in discovering and looking around, being more aware of the art, all the different movements in art, painting, architecture, construction, because I was involved in all the projects that my parents were.
And did your parents
Doing.
work together on their projects?
Not yes, they were.
They did.
On the
Interesting.
I mean the family projects, yes, and we were all involved in that process. And I mean I think it's part of my genes, and this is something that I really like, and I think I give it and share it with my children as well.
Is there? I'm wondering. You know, I think of when I think about going to Europe. It always seems so old to me. I mean, was the architecture world more traditional, and was it taught to you more with those traditional older forms, or were you introduced to a lot of more modern? I don't know. I mean, because I noticed the difference between, you know, being in the United States. You know, things are just more spread out and more. They're less traditional, I feel like, here in architecture. Anyway.
But in a way, I feel like they're a little bit more conventional as well.
They're more conventional
practical
here.
here.
It's but it's also. I mean, we grew up in that's part of our daily life, as you said. So this is something that we got used to it, and that's part of our culture.
Yeah,
and
you
then
internalize
we
it.
are educated to the other movement,
Sure.
more modern, and also the American movement. And because I'm a trained architect, I also learn about the social vision of
Sure.
the architecture and the way we are building for people, the way we are making the cities for people,
Yeah, that's
which is
fascinating.
completely different from the European culture
Yes.
to the American one, just because of the history of our, I mean, continents.
Yes.
Right.
It's way younger here. Grew up and the cities were really developed in the 19th centuries, basically. And so it's completely different from our culture. I grew up in the city that is 2,600 years
Yeah.
old. So
Yeah. It affects you.
affects
Yeah, it
the
affects the
completely.
way that it affects your lens. And
but it
yeah,
also
and-
gives you the opportunity to step back and have a clear vision of the way we are interact with the with the art, with the all the technique and all these elements that are part of our life,
yes.
and that's very important. And this is my roots, really, and this is also my education as an architect.
Yes.
So when I moved here, I had the opportunity to really reinvest all what I learned and was part of my education and my life there, to really project that in the design field, because I'm doing interior design here, but it's all very related to the architecture and the relationship between the interior and exteriors, the space together, how people are interacting with these spaces.
Right. We can see in your designs, obviously, like you value certain things above what just a conventional decorator who's going to be thinking more about the fabrics and the finishes and decorating and doing something because they can, rather than because of how it's going to make the people there feel and interact with each other. So it's really interesting. I mean, you're starting at the foundation, but the primal experience of the space, which I think is really, really interesting. So you've worked as an interior decorator and you've worked as an architect, and now you're kind of melding both, I guess you could say.
Yes.
And do you think that moving to the States was an opportunity for you to kind of reevaluate where you were creatively and make a decision as to your own creative path?
Probably, because I think we have more opportunities here. People are really looking for your advices and your expertise. And I mean, money-wise, of course, people are really, and it's part of also of the American culture to get the people with the knowledge more involved in what they are not mastering for everything.
We like to delegate. Who has the talent?
Who has the exactly?
Who's the talent? Yeah.
And really, I think what I'm bringing to the clients is really getting the opportunity to translate their needs in something that is their life. And that's going to be their space.
And I think that's what a good designer does, rather than trying to impose their own desires and to try to sublimate the vision of the family, the needs of the family, and kind of give them something that they didn't even know they wanted, but they actually ultimately end up realizing that they needed.
Yeah.
And I think that's really wonderful. So can you give us a few examples of really successful projects that you did that kind of transformed the way that people used their space?
Mainly it's when you are getting into the house that we have to remodel, and the people are saying that, oh, I don't need that space because we don't use it.
Right.
Yes, they don't use it because it's not made for
it's not useful.
The practice for
them. Oh, so that must be so fun for you, the challenge of making it useful.
Absolutely.
Making a meaningful space that's not being used.
Yes. And I think people, I mean, the Americans are more open to let you drive them into these
they'll let you talk them into something. I think that the Europeans have had so much experience and so much tradition behind the types of spaces that they believe that they are meant to have, that they are a lot less apt to say, sure, whatever you want, whatever you think.
Yes.
That's not a word that would come out of a French person's mouth. Like, do whatever you think.
Exactly.
No
not
way.
to compare, it's just a different culture.
Well, you can't make sweeping generalizations about anyone, right? But it's, I mean, I definitely think there's more freedom to do that here, and the spaces are smaller. I feel like there's just, here people have more sprawling space.
Some do.
I don't know. Yeah, some do. I'm making generalizations. My experience was that there's more people closer together in Europe, and they've been there for a long time. There's a lot of like history that's just, I don't know, that's just my feeling. And then here, I just feel like things are more whimsical or something. Less, it's just my perception. But I could see where they would look to you for more expertise in the design process.
And do you feel that being from a different culture, being from Europe, gives you an advantage in some way of kind of having that setback of being able to look at something from the outside and seeing what's needed?
I think it's probably part of being European in one way, having the architectural education and another way, and living in California for so long. I mean, I blended all these together to make something that is really the good way of bringing, and my experience, because I have now enough years of experience.
Right.
to-
So yeah, exactly. I think for you, I
That's
think that
also-
experience
yeah.
has really brought you
Yes.
this rounded level of expertise that you feel confident that now you're kind of this complete solution for people because you know what you're doing. You know what
Yeah.
you're talking about. You
I mean,
have
you always have to
keep growing, of course.
growing
but,
and
yeah.
also adjust with each of your clients because
Right.
they're all different. They have all different expectations on the project and different vision and perspective and life. Just having different lives. So you really have to adjust with that. And I think the experience helps just taking the process in a more calm and peaceful way than being completely involved. And I mean, I can sit back and look
Kind of trust that it's
Yes.
going to unfold in a natural
Yes.
way. Yeah, that makes
and
sense.
anticipate also on all
Yes.
of these.
And did you have
cases.
one project in particular that was kind of a huge growing experience or a big lesson for you along the way? And you don't have to name names or give identifying details, but some.
I've done some big projects over the past years, and I think each of them are very challenging in some way because you have to always adjust with your clients, and they're all coming from different backgrounds. So
I think that's where, and I think that's where
That's
architecture and design is a more unique creative field because a lot of things like art or writing or music, you're just dropping them out there and they'll affect people how they will, but you have to work with somebody to create something.
You have
that's
to
going work for
collaborate
you.
with the people that
Yeah.
live there to get a sense of who you're creating for.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and this is a process that you have to reinvent in some way for
Every
each of
time,
the
for
clients.
every
Yes,
time.
yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And
I could
then,
see that.
I mean, it makes it easier when you have the experience, but the process itself is always different. From
Yeah, I
one
mean, you
client
literally
the
have
other.
to go to the drawing table with these people.
That's a good one.
Yes.
Yeah, back to
Yeah,
the drawing board.
back to the drawing table every single time to kind of start their story.
Yes.
Exactly, and I
Yeah.
think there's some. I mean, the psychology that's involved, the storytelling that's because I think there's storytelling.
Storytelling is very important for my
Yeah.
the design process because you need to get the people involved in what you're creating for them, and they need to really dive with you into
Yeah.
that.
They have to own
These
it.
ideas, like
Yeah.
you're creating a movie for them,
Yes.
even if it's not real.
Yeah.
Right.
However, you are creating that with 3D images, but you have to get them through the process.
Yeah.
So they can
That's
understand.
probably the
and
best part of it.
That's how I
Yeah, that seems like the
Do the,
most
um,
fun.
yes.
It is fun,
It
but I've read some articles that say that sometimes it's more about the imagination part and more about the dreaming part for the clients.
Yeah.
So sometimes we have all this 3D imagery now and all these very hyper realistic things, and actually the client is going to be much more drawn in if you can tell them the story
Yeah.
of the space and then show them something that's inspiring, like a sketch or a small view, but it has to have enough of that nebulous thing so that they can dream about it. and
Yes,
get really
I agree with
involved.
you because I've been shopping for a rug for my little Shangri-La
Yes.
area that my daughter and I are doing.
Uh-huh.
And I always say, we're not poor, honey. We're European, because we live in a one-bedroom apartment a very big one-bedroom apartment that I've I'm redesigning right now. So we've been shopping for this rug because we're creating this lounge area. And it gives you these views of and now they have this thing where see the rug in
the
your
room.
space.
You're like,
and I was like, no,
no.
I don't want to
No.
see the rug in the space because I will criticize. It's one thing to see it in a
too much.
picture. It's too much. I want to dream about it in the space and then have it there in
And then
real
have it come
time.
together. Exactly.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Because you are creating a story about the around that space
Yes.
you're creating. Because if you want to say it's a lounge area, so what do you want to feel when you're sitting there? How do you want to be with people? Do you want to interact with people when you're
Yeah.
sitting there?
Right.
Are
People
you by
wanna,
yourself?
it's not just design, it's like a
it's not
fantasy that
design,
they're building.
because
yeah.
we're not staging. That's
Well,
the difference between
yeah.
staging and designing the space
Yes.
for the clients. And this is for me the big difference of what
Huge difference.
I'm bringing
Yeah.
to my client and what I can see around in the design field
Yes.
here and the design industry. I do not assimilate myself to a designer because I'm not staging the house.
I like that distinction that you're making. That's a
And
really
that's
true. It's a true distinction.
No, it's a really
important.
good distinction.
Not that, I mean, I really value the work of the staging because I think they're doing a great job.
Well, they're doing a service to people too.
Yeah, they're
It's
creating
like
an ambiance so people can walk in
Exactly.
and they can project their imagination.
Right, but it has to
onto
be
it.
bland enough that anybody can
Yes.
project themselves into it.
Yes.
That's kind of the opposite of what
Of-
you're doing when you're trying to create for a specific
yes.
person.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I
that's
agree
so
with that.
interesting. I mean, I just think the designer thing is kind of a quandary because now when you look at everybody's on Pinterest and they're all pinning the same things and they're all jumping on board with these trends that don't correspond to their personal needs or wants or who they are, and I find it so sad because they end up with these spaces that you're like, what is this? You know,
Yes.
it's so that's kind
Yeah.
of, you know, being able to really talk to the person and convince them that you are making something for them,
Yeah.
I think is probably so valuable for them.
Well, one of the things that I experienced, and I'm sure I've spoken to you about this before, is I used to work with my brother has a reclaimed lumber company, and I used to sell old wood, like old wood flooring and recycled barn wood and all that stuff. And I would have clients that would come in, you know, very wealthy clients, and they'd be, oh, I saw this in a magazine, and I want this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they would just, and then they would start looking at it and they'd be like, oh God, is it going to have all this color variation and all these nail holes and this texture? I can't deal with that. It's too real for me, you know. But they would see it, you know, they'd bring me the magazine article, and this probably happens to you, and then they would want,
Like, this is absolutely what I want, and then be like,
Yes.
ooh, but
and then they couldn't commit to the reality of what it was. And the other part that I thought was interesting, and you know, is I do feel like people are, because of the busy modern world that we live in, a lot of inside places, and you're not in nature as much as we were in the past. You know, people are drawn to natural elements, and it kind of resonates, and they don't know how to bridge that.
yeah, they need to bring it in.
They don't know how to bridge, like, they're drawn to this wood, rustic wood. They don't know how to bring it in elementally. I mean, do you find that happens in your work, where they're trying to bring in an element that they
need
need it and they want it, but they don't know how to really accept it? Do you have that happen?
Yes, yeah, they happen
Okay.
all the time because they are visualizing something that is idealistically
Yes.
what they
Yeah.
like.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
but that's
And
not their
then
life.
that's not the life.
Yeah.
And also, I like to bring the story behind each
Yeah.
of the elements. I mean, choosing a light fixture, for example, talking about one of my last project, it was choosing the right light fixture that wouldn't be something too obvious in the sense of okay, it's just a light fixture. No, we bring it here in that specific location because it has a meaning for the
Right.
space.
Yes.
It has a history behind the creation of these. If it's a special piece, you have the artist behind that, and also how it impact the life in that space, and how you interact with that, with the light and the mood of the room. I mean, that's all the aspect that I'm very sensitive to, and I'm trying to get my clients not
To be in touch
educating,
with
but
that.
being more connected to that.
Yeah.
And sometimes, there is some pieces that are brought into the project, and they're
And you're like,
completely,
what the hell am I going to do with this?
So I'm trying to understand the process, why they're bringing these kind of elements in the design
Yeah.
itself.
Well, also I find that some people can visualize things and
Yes.
some people cannot, and it's two different. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean you're more creative or less creative. It's just a thing that some people can and cannot do.
Yes.
But
and you
know,
kind
it's
of have
just
to
something-
facilitate that.
Yes, for
Yes,
sure.
and at some point you have to accept, because the clients they have their own perception of the space. They have their perception of the different textures and colors, and you have to also adjust and really take the best of
Examine
what
it
they
with them.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
what
I think
they
it's an
want.
exercise in humility too, because so many designers think, "Oh, I'm an artist. I'm the artiste. I'm the one who. I'm the designer. I'm
There's
the
an ego
decider."
involved.
There's an ego involved, but in reality, it's a service profession where you're actually
You're a
serving, but
facilitator.
you should. I think it's very hard for some designers to stop taking themselves as the king when really no, you're under the client. The client, you're serving the client.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's what I learned. The first thing I learned here when I went to college here for interior design classes, that don't forget that you have the clients and they are the clients.
Yeah, they're
And
paying
you
your
have to
bills.
serve them.
You serve
and
the
you
clients,
have to
yes.
serve them. You have to translate their needs.
Yeah, and you
that's
need to make
something
things
that I-
easier for them, not the
Yes.
other way around.
And that's something
Yeah.
that I learned here and I never heard about in the past 20 years I had.
Well,
in
customer
France.
service is a very American
And-
concept, I
yes.
believe.
It is.
So
It
that,
is.
but I think it's a valuable concept. I think it's something.
Absolutely.
You know, I think that there's an honor that comes, like so many interior designers or artists come from this place of like, oh, my ego is making me be the king or queen of this project, and boom, 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 I'm right, you're wrong. And really, I think that there's a real satisfaction that comes from knowing that you've served the client properly and that they, you know, end up truly happy with what you've done because you actually listened to them and that you worked with them, you know, and not against them or not trying to assert your will because why? You know?
Yeah, I mean, well, you're not going to live there. Why
Right.
would you do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think we also need to have the creative process that you have also in the fashion industry with the haute couture and
Right, but you can
it's the
push them
same
further a little bit too.
process,
Yeah.
Yes. So you have some creator like designer that are bringing new stuff, architect bringing things that are really
Yeah.
Right, but I think
Truly,
once your client trusts you because you've served them so
Yes.
well, I think that's when you can say, listen,
Yes.
now you trust me because I've earned that trust by serving you properly, and now I can introduce this new element that pushes you a little tiny bit further than your comfort zone.
Absolutely.
But you're going to thank me in the end, and if you're not happy, I mean, obviously, then you can always take
Yeah.
it back. But so how have your children growing up with such a creative but entrepreneurial, creative, real life, everyday, creative working mom, what have they learned from you? What do you think that they've absorbed from that whole experience?
Thank you for the nice.
It's beautiful.
Isn't it nice?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's basically what they learn on the daily life of enjoying everything that they can take from the what's going on around them. Just looking at the sunrise, the sunset, the colors, the lights, all these elements that are part of your daily life, and being aware of each of these things that makes your life better, nicer, and you're just more open to each of the elements of everything in the nature.
I think that circles back to the whole Marin County thing. I mean,
Exactly,
there's a
yes.
huge richness of that quality of light, quality of nature, quality of environment that you do find in Marin. And we sound very Marin chauvinistic, but I think California is kind of a really great creative place. And again, we were
Yes.
talking about the artists and creators
It
who
is.
choose to be here. And I really think that
It
there's
always
something.
has
there's
been. It
something
always
here.
has
Yes.
been. I mean,
And that's
musicians
part
have
of
flocked
the
here, and
culture,
art. Yeah, I mean,
The local.
yeah, I definitely feel like people have flocked here because of the freedom of the arts in California, for sure. And yeah, and I think that children,
We are really encouraging them.
yeah, and they, you know,
pursuing
children
these.
do. They don't really do what you say; they do what you do. They watch you, and I think
So they're reactive to what their experience is.
I mean, when you expose them, because you know, my daughter grows up in that too. You know, I'm a very creative person, and she's surrounded by people that are creative, and so it becomes, you know, part of the air that they breathe, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to see people raising their children with that.
And being aware of where they live and what they're surrounded
Yeah.
and being aware of the city life and people and how they interact, and that's all the
And I think the difference between your children who grew up with this creative mom who's making it her business and her job versus children who had a mom who was maybe a little bit more frustrated with being creative and balancing it with other things, or who was a frustrated creative. Your kids actually, I think, are seeing the reality of, okay, I'm a creative, how am I going to make this work for me professionally? I can see them both going in that direction, as opposed to another child who's going to be like, oh, I'm doing this as a hobby, and then I need to cast it aside. Your children are actually...
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I mean, I see them, saying, okay, I need to get this education and do this and take it seriously from the get-go, and I think that's a huge advantage. And I think, it's generational too, because so many of us had, upbringings where the arts or creative jobs were not.
That was not
accepted.
something that was. Yeah, my parents obviously they didn't send me to art camp.
Yeah,
They
you
were
have to
like,
watch.
that is not a real job.
Watch our Marguerite episode. You'll hear the sob story literally.
Yeah, where I start crying.
I've never done any art camps in France.
So Micah stopped crying. She didn't do an art camp either.
We were just having the
There's no tissues
kind
on
of
the yeah, but you were surrounded. Europe is. It's kind of like I said. It's in the water there. You can't.
I don't
really
think there
avoid
actually.
it.
Yeah, I don't think there actually are really art camps in Europe.
No,
you
we don't
can't
have
really
any camps.
avoid.
Well, we have camps, but they're all about torture and hiking and backpacks.
Yeah, it's contrived here.
Yeah,
right?
Literally,
Very
Europe does
contrived.
not have arts camps. Camps in Europe are like parents getting their kids out of there and being like, oh gosh, really, you're going to hike for 3 weeks and barely
In
eat
Switzerland,
anything?
we're gonna drink the whole time.
Yeah, hard-boiled eggs for you. Have fun.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, it's more of a
Character
consciousness
building.
here of being the kids involved into all of these, and that's not what I'm trying to do for the kids.
Yeah, but
Not
this
like-
was in the 1970s or
Yes.
early 1980s when
Yes.
this was going on. So.
Don't age us, okay? Don't date us, Micah. Speak for yourself, darling.
And this was not last week in Mill Valley.
No,
This
it was not last week in Mill Valley. But, okay, let's look at last week in Mill Valley, because let's see the difference between the average Mill Valley parent who is not, the people who, okay, for example, the guys who are in Metallica, whose kids were in our kids' school for a time, and their kid is not going to arts camp. He's literally playing guitar with a heavy metal band on stage at the age of 12, okay? This is a different thing. However, the affluent Mill Valley parent who works in tech or in finance, their kid's going to arts summer camp. That kid is not going to go and be a professional creative unless they really, make a conscious effort. But it's not, whereas you grew up with these working artist parents, your kids are the same way, working creative mom, your kids are seeing it as much more of a possibility. And, I flatter myself and hope that, my kids, I've got one who's going into medicine probably, but she keeps telling me, the humanities are actually kind of interesting. And I think I'm a very creative person. And I'm like, go work. And I try not to say that, knowing that I'm being a horrible person. But then I have a son who I, really believe is talented in the arts, and I'm telling him, I'm like, you don't know.
You need to get a real job.
No, I'm not.
I'm joking.
I'm telling him, I, think you're very creative and very talented. You need to work harder at it, but you're lucky to have a mom who's telling you go into the arts instead of being like, no, do that on the side. Because everybody, even my friends, tell me about my son. Oh, let him do it on the side. He needs to get a real degree. And I'm like, no. I want him to have every opportunity to explore that if that's what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Make up your damn mind. But,
And if this is really what he likes, you have to
exactly. Well, yeah. So have you had that conversation with your children?
Not really. I had that conversation with my parents at the time.
Oh, you did?
Yes, because I was in a scientist field. From high school, and they thought it was better for me to go with the any of the medical field
They're like,
or
make more
anything
money.
like that. Just because the art field, design, architecture is much more competitive in some way. It's harder for women at some point at that time, and I was not encouraged to work in that.
It's funny how there's that whole male architect idea. It's so funny how it's viewed. It's an artistic field, but it's a scientific field, and it's so viewed as a male.
It's a male-dominated field for sure.
It is, which I find kind of shocking. Really,
it is shocking because I feel
women
like
listen.
Well, women listen, but I feel like I read a book. Oh God, what's it called? It was Leonard Shlain. I mean, he's since died, but it was women.
She always reads the best books, and then I have to cut out about 5
It
seconds
was,
of her going, it was.
It's the goddess versus the alphabet.
Okay, wait.
It's called the goddess versus the alphabet.
Rewind and say you were reading a book. And
I
tell
was
us, okay.
reading a book. And
Wait. Okay, go.
Yes. So I was reading this great book, and the author has since died. His name was Leonard Shlain. He was a doctor in San Francisco, I believe, at UCSF, and he wrote a book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess, and it was
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I mean, he talked a lot about actually the things that are happening right now in our culture,
Very much so.
about how women's brains are more image oriented,
and the men owned the alphabet.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then the men own the alphabet, and therefore kind
Power.
of, they were because they owned the alphabet and created language,
law and power,
and the patriarchy.
Patriarchy
soon followed.
Again. Yeah.
And and that's basically what we're dealing with right now today.
Yeah, but architecture is all about constructs, and it's
more. Yeah, but I mean, it is more these. I think I don't know, the way that he describes the brain and how the women's brain developed. From my perspective, it seemed like the women's brain would be better at creating structures and imagining spaces and imagery more so. And it's not a male-female thing. I just think that over time, when you get, certain fields get genderized like that.
Well, because they say women are better mechanics, actually.
Yeah,
in terms of the way their brain works. Yeah.
Yes, I'm not completely sure about the vision of the male versus woman on the certain field or others. It's just the way it was set up for so long that people got used to work this way. For women not to be a thinker for any of the engineering part, where actually they are proving that they are good.
Of course,
at least as good as the men, and men are good for other fields that were more dedicated to the women. So I'm not sure there is something, and it's changing right now. But
I agree.
I mean, I saw that over the years of my professional experience, life. And,
I think it's really wonderful that the gender roles are becoming much less
cracked.
strict.
It's getting cracked open. Yeah, for sure.
It used to be that you'd say like, oh, well, this guy is a fashion designer, and people would say, oh, he's gay, and that's not true at all. Like, that is not 100% the case.
He's just more feminine.
Yeah, and it's like,
what
no,
they're saying.
and that's not true.
Yeah.
Or they would say, that woman's an engineer. Oh, she's butch, isn't she? No, not necessarily. And I think people are stopping. There's a lot less of that now. I think it's starting to.
Well,
chill out,
that I always say that knitting was the first engineering.
The
fact that we, women. Well,
but the men were knitting.
The men were knitting, not initially, but once they started to really manufacture clothing and knit sweaters, men were the ones doing it. But initially, it was the women that were knitting. And, I mean, when you think about constructing a three-dimensional object with string and two sticks.
I mean, that's architecture.
It's engineering.
It's engineering and architecture.
It really is in its most fundamental form. To make stitches and patterns that can create a three-dimensional object with sticks and a string is brilliant,
Absolutely.
actually.
I agree, and you find the same process in the fabric industry and the traditional fabric that you can find in Africa, where they are doing these very
stories.
geometric
Patterns.
Weaving.
Well, they're weaving a story into the geometry of the pattern.
Exactly,
it's insane.
That's where I think the architecture is everywhere.
It is.
Because you can see it in every domain of the creativity of fabric of. I mean, everything.
Everything.
Everywhere.
I
love that you can see
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And well, so in conclusion, where do you see your creativity and your love of architecture? Like, how would you like to push that further in your creativity and in your career as you move forward? What would you like to see for yourself?
Where would I like?
Not geographically, just where would you like your creativity
You're not
to be?
leaving.
No. I would say.
Bitch, you're staying here.
You can go wherever you want.
I think it's always the process of exploring and growing in your knowledge and in your experience with people, with different projects, and always getting something new. Always exploring something that you don't know, because we are not limited in any way in the process of
I like that she's got a growth mindset.
I like the growth mindset.
We like the growth mindset a lot. Well, is there one area in which you feel that you hadn't explored it as much as you wanted to up until now, and that you're kind of hoping that you'll be able to go further in that?
I would love to go back actually to the sculpture process, because it's very sensitive, it's very emotional, and that's
tactile
something yes, and that's something that I didn't have the time to explore as much as I like to, and that's probably something that I can reserve for my older age.
Yes,
at some point.
I love that.
that.
I love it.
Wow.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us, Natalie. It was a great creative conversation with you.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you. Cheers.
Come away with something new and some new concepts, which we love.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us, you guys. And, if you know of anybody that we should have a creative conversation with, especially if they're in Marin County or San Francisco area,
Or they want to come visit
or
us.
if they want to come visit us, or if they want to call in, we can do that too. We won't dial it in just because they call in. We would love that. Comment down below, and we will see you guys next time. Cheers.
Cheers.